the Stoics have a saying, the obstacle is the path. And wow, that's a very good motto to have, because what I realized when you're doing something different and you're like formulating differently and you're building your business differently, people don't really understand what you're talking about. I've realized. And that's cool if you can kind of take it in that is your path. That obstacle is the path.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the next episode of the Beauty and the Brand podcast. My special guest today is Maria Wodzinska. She's the co-founder of Stoic Beauty. And I wanted to have her on here because she's building a beauty brand with a larger impact in mind every step of the way, namely ocean conservancy and water safety practices in the beauty industry. And as an Ontario, Canada brand, Stoic is committed to protect our waterways and their inhabitants. Inspired by the many Indigenous nations' water protectors, Maria is passionate about recognizing and honoring our precious resources of nature today. Maria, so great to have you on here. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you, Aggie. I'm so excited to chat with you. It's always opens new channels in my mind. So
and I always love our conversations because I feel like there's just so much like entertainment and excitement that comes out of them and like sparks. So I'm super excited to have you on this episode. And okay, first, I'd love for you to tell us a bit about like yourself and like what inspired you to even create Stoic in the first place.
Yeah, it's funny because I got this list of questions from you and I was trying to answer this preemptively, but I thought, you know what? What's going to come out is going to come out. So, I mean, I've always been entrepreneurial. Like that's been a thing since I was a little kid. So when my mom used to tell the story that whenever we'd have garage sales and stuff, I'd be the one hustling like a 6-year-old, being like, oh, you could get just this chair, but you could also get the table and it's a 2, and I'd be kind of like moving the product that way.
Nice.
And then I also just in my 20s, I worked in theater more than anything. So it was all creative storytelling. And that meant that I had to have other jobs. So I was always working for other people's small businesses. Like I worked for a real estate agent, built their database. I built my parents' database for their pharma business. I did bookkeeping. I helped someone grow a cafe. And yeah, so it just,
wow.
I really love figuring out how things work. And so it was very, honestly, serendipitous how I made Stoic Beauty happen, because I was working in theater, predominantly in kind of environmental impact oriented theater productions that were all outdoor with giant puppets and Indigenous youth. And it was a very exciting time. But because I could only make like half a year's worth of money doing that, I was doing the bookkeeping for my mother's pharma business. And then I would just like whip that into the computer and we'd have a little bit of time left and we'd futz around making skincare because we could, and she was interested in it and we were messing around. And then when the pandemic hit, I just knew their business well enough to know that their books could accommodate me taking some of my mother's time. And also that we had the passion and skill set to do something very interesting in the skincare industry. So my mother, who's an organic chemist, really thought through all the formulations, but I was just the one putting all the pieces together and being like, can we build a small business here? And then when we did start selling skincare products in this very roundabout way, I was like, I can bring back my like water mission from my theater days to the skincare brand, because my mother, who had worked in pharmaceutical drug development, knew that there's such limited regulation in the cosmetic industry for how things end up in our water systems. And she's just like, this is such an obvious place of where we could do better. And so we just kind of went with that, ran with it, made that our mission, and along the way made some really great products. And I'm learning every day. So it's very exciting.
I love that. And I love how I love how one thing led to another that led to another. And it's almost like following the path and in a very natural and all like authentic way. It's like, where does this lead us?
It's interesting because I'm now a huge cheerleader of the book 10x is easier than 2x that you recommended, but everyone in my sphere is reading it now, like all
Yes,
the
I'm so happy.
entrepreneurs that I'm interacting with. And one of the things that is so true from that is that you can't connect the dots forward. You can only connect them backwards.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's so obvious to me that everything I was doing before has resonance in what I'm doing now.
Right. But you wouldn't know that.
I wouldn't know that. No.
Yeah.
And
it only happens that you can connect them, backward or forwards.
One thing that I'll just share with you because I find it interesting because I did it yesterday and I was like, this is cool.
Huh.
So how does theater relate to marketing and skincare? And I'm like, I know how because we know how to devise. So I want to go on a little tangent here.
Mm-hmm.
My main part of my career was learning how to, with a group with very unique individuals, create together. And so a typical model for making theater is that you'd have a script, but I know how to devise theater, which means you don't even have a script. You just have like a context or a theme. And how do you coax creation out of everybody and then shape it? And I realized that my whole team could be much more involved in content creation rather than it just being kind of siloed, like my poor little Hirao being like, I need to make all this content. And I just went, oh my God, I just need to devise how we do this because yes, you can make content by, having a content calendar and everyone follows the little script that it's made and you follow the trends and you go to ChatGPT and it scripts it. But, if everyone's doing that, then the unique stuff is going to be in this other path. So
correct.
When this gets released, we'll be a few months into what I will call our devising content creation process, which is just the reapplication of a creative process I was doing in theater, now
That's
digital.
So cool.
I'm like,
I love that you're applying your process that you honed in on through your theater training into this nobody would normally connect these two things. And yet you're doing it and you're doing it in a really, outside the box way, which I love, which means that, like you said, it's going to hit different. Yeah. It's not going to be like, oh, this is another rote, spit out from ChatGPT or, formulaic, process that everyone else is following, but something that is truly organic. Yeah. Oh, sorry about that ting. It's okay. Hector, can you take that ding out?
Yeah, thank you. No, I agree. And, no shade about ChatGPT, although kind of shade because all my creator people in my life are totally having their life destroyed. But no shade, I guess. I think it's a very powerful tool. But okay, I want to tell another little story. We're going to go down a little funny path.
And I do have a question going back to like what you mentioned with your childhood. So, but I wrote it down. So we'll come back to that.
Great. Mm-hmm. So I'm just thinking about ChatGPT and I'm thinking about lost wisdom so my sister, she's also an artist. She went to a blacksmithing school to learn artistic blacksmithing. Odd and wonderful. But what she learned at this blacksmithing program is it only took one generation to forget how to do this certain kind of blacksmithing technique. And they just don't know how to do it anymore. Like it's written down, but they don't know how to do it.
Huh.
And so that's kind of how I feel about ChatGPT is that, yes, you can use it, but if you lose the process of how things get created, really, how do people draw unique connections? How do people how do people generate a piece of material that other people connect to deeply? Mm-hmm. That's actually a very technical process. And so, no shade, but we can lose a lot of wisdom if we completely abdicate that process to an AI. So
absolutely. And actually to echo that, there's this documentary that my husband and I were watching on Japanese ink and how it's made and how it's generations upon generations of generations that are molding this ink with their feet and then heating it with candles. It's a very long, arduous process. And I can only imagine, and then people pay like largest sums of money for this type of ink that can only originate from Japan versus something that is mass produced, right? And I can only imagine if like the next generation says, let's just build this machine that will cut out all these steps. And then over time, what we'll find is that the quality of the ink is not the same as it was. And then everyone's humming and hawing and wondering, well, what happened? How is it not the same? It should be the same. And it's like, well, there are all these unique steps that actually had their own impact in some way.
Yeah. And I think it's really hitting the nail on the head of a thing I'm seeing in the beauty industry, which is all the excesses of fast fashion are now coming into fast beauty. And so it's my one little caution for emerging founders, like just be mindful of how much as an emerging founder, or like if you're just entering the industry, you'll be pulled into processes that are expedient and are part of the fast beauty movement, but actually reduce the quality of the product, reduce the quality of so many things. So I don't know, sometimes you can go very fast by going slower, actually, because your quality is just exponentially better.
Yes. And then by itself, like you stand out on your own as a result. So I love that reminder, because I see these like ads that pop up around like start your product brand, or like create your product for $250. And no joke, like people, I'm sure people are clicking on it and like, signing up with whatever it is, that's, or reselling products. Right. And it's like, why do, not to like ruffle feathers, but maybe to ruffle feathers. I do think there's something to be said about intention and creating something that is from scratch rather than just like reselling something on Amazon where there's no heart in it. There's no passion. There's no like thoughtfulness or intention put into it. People feel that, people see that. And that's why you see brands, I wouldn't call those brands, I'd say those are like more like a product that's being sold, crash and burn. Like it might do really well because of specific tactics around keywords and SEO and ads, but then you're not really creating and building something that is of substance. And I think that's why I was excited to have you on here, because so much of our conversation back and forth has been not just about like, how do we increase, our conversions or our website to improve or whatever. It's been around like, well, how do we continue to weave the bigger conversation around water safety and, blue beauty as we're building the brand, as we're building the business? Because you told me, and this kind of stuck with me, you said, I'm not excited by like more, just more selling, even though selling is great and getting sales is fun and great and we all love it. But I'm more excited about, in doing the selling, it allows me to have a bigger voice around this issue. And the bigger of a business we can build, the more we can actually impact the whole cause and purpose of why this business exists in the first place. And that really stuck with me, because it made it very clear that you are so aligned with why you're doing this. And like, it's not about just like some extra sales.
I have so much to say about that, because I've thought a lot about that particular theme in how we're building Stoic, which is actually one of the reasons why we have that name. Why did we name ourselves Stoic? How is it on this theme of staying aligned? So the Stoics have a saying, the obstacle is the path. And wow, that's a very good motto to have, because what I realize when you're doing something different and you're like formulating differently and you're building your business differently, people don't really understand what you're talking about. I've realized. And that's cool if you can kind of take it in that is your path. That obstacle is the path, right? And so water safety, while it is pivotal in what we're doing, which means that our ingredients biodegrade well in water and do not bioaccumulate in aquatic life, because no one even is aware that that is a problem, which is shocking, because we're just beginning to be aware of like the bioaccumulation and toxicity in the textile industry. It's going to come to skincare eventually, but yeah, no one's aware this is a problem. So that's a bit of an obstacle to be like, how can I tell someone that we're not doing something that they already think is not happening? So what? It really made me kind of go, okay, well, we have to hold that as the North Star and continue to talk about it and continue to make sure that everything we do is aligned to that. And yet we have to not talk about it because it doesn't do anything in terms of business, right? And so it created this kind of schizophrenic strategy in some ways, which is that on a high level, when we're talking to like industry and trying to make our collaborations and kind of more impact driven moves, we talk only about that. But to the customer, we are just talking to them about what they care about, which is that the product works and that it's clean, even though clean means very little. At least they know that word. And so in figuring out that there's that kind of dissonance of the reality of the way the cosmetic industry is polluting our waterways and the customer's like actual state of mind, we started to realize, oh, okay, so that obstacle is where we should be considering having really great allied partnerships, so we can amplify the messaging through the partnerships, not through direct to consumer. And yeah.
Let me ask you, let me just pause there for a moment to ask you the question of like, how do you stay aligned to that North Star when there are pressures to grow the business? Because I know that, you know, I think our founders typically do have a bigger mission or a bigger impact that they are trying to make with their brand. And yet it can be so hard to stay focused on that when, you know, you have bills to pay and you got to bring in sales and you got to, you know, increase growth and all that.
Yeah, really great question. I'm going to think having comfort with risk, honestly. Like, honestly, I don't think there's any other way. It's having some, because, okay, look, like mission driven is going to be harder. Like it just is. It has its benefits and it draws like energy and people and collaboration, but it is kind of painstaking because it took us a while to get to simplicity, I guess, because like we didn't know how to balance the environmental conversation with just the product efficacy conversation. And so we read a lot, like we read a lot of like beauty independent articles, and we saw like, okay, most sustainable brands, and I put it in quotes because they're all at different processes in their sustainability, they don't lead with sustainability, they lead with efficacy. And that's what has success. And so
that's such gold right there.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And so it really is having this kind of, I don't know. I think that, you know, I'm going to come up with a new analogy here. Hold on. I was thinking of it before the call. Business ownership in general is an external work and an internal work. Like it's going to be both because you can only grow the business as much as you allow yourself to grow, because as the founder, you're constantly changing because you have to change as the business grows.
Yes.
And so what I'd say is that there has to be such an internal resilience to say, I am doing XYZ to grow the business while I'm like containing and sustaining my like motivation and drive internally to say no to the opportunities that aren't aligned. That's it. So that's like inner work that mirrors in the outer work. And
that's so important. I find that like once the moments where I stop doing the inner work, or like I stop my practice in the morning, like my meditation and my journaling practice, that's when the fear creeps in, right? That's where the discomfort impacts decision making, which is where you start to go down an incorrect path. I think that's kind of what you're sharing too, is like being comfortable with with risk, but in order to be comfortable with risk, it's a practice to become comfortable with it. It's not like Maria is just maybe,
No.
I mean, just born with it,
No,
born with
I'm
like
not.
the comfort with risk, like, and of course some people are more comfortable with risk than others, but it is a day in, day out practice
Yeah.
to hold that North Star.
Yeah.
Right. Can you tell us
Yeah.
more about that?
Yeah, for sure. I have two ways of thinking about holding a North Star in the context of like risk and loss and all this. So one is more esoteric and one is more business oriented. So I'll say both.
Yes.
But there's a really excellent book called The Leverage Equation, which really blew my mind when I read it, because it's just about how, all kind of success is built on leverage. Like you leverage both your assets, so capital, but you also leverage other people's knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an excellent thing to just realize that you will always be leveraging assets that are some yours and sometimes other
Correct.
people's. And then in that equation, there is always a downside. And in fact, you lose more than you win. And so all you're trying to do is make choices so that the winners have a larger capacity to eat the losses. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, it takes a stomach to
Yeah.
know that will happen and to not take it as personal failing, because you will lose more than you win. It's just normal.
Can you give us an example of how you've used
Yeah.
that leverage equation in your business?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, again, it's still in the process, but we're in the process of doing VC round. We'll see if by the time this launches, it's closed. I think it will. But leverage is, the second we got a distributor coming to us with a really great deal, that's when I start making my phone calls to my VCs to be like, hey, this is down the pike. Let's make the meeting faster. Like, that's just a very small example of leveraging. Like, that's like leveraging an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to open the door for another opportunity.
Right.
But then there's also like
That's
leveraging
a great
other
point.
people's mastery. Like, that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge thing.
That's a
So,
huge thing.
I mean, even joining your mastermind, it's like every time I I can learn a bunch of stuff, of course, like most smart people can, but it's so much faster and so much better to leverage other people's zone of genius and give them a call and be like, hey, I'll tell you about storytelling for half an hour and you tell me about your TikTok ads, because I don't get this,
Yes,
So
absolutely. I love that you mentioned that, because I think it's something that I love to do, is like go directly to the source.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to be controversial, but I don't watch the news and I don't read the news. But I go to people that I trust, that will have a sort of a really interesting take or an impartial take on it. My husband being the person, the person in this case, and my neighbor, to learn about, like, well, what's happening? What should I know about? What's important? What's important? Because I just want to go directly to the source versus having to spend a ton of time sifting through a bunch of knowledge that now has taken up my brain and has taken my focus off of the thing that I really need to be focusing on.
Well, I want to just say, I think that's going to sound controversial, but I want to agree with you that it's a good path. And I want to say two things about that. One is that media, literally the word, means that the information has been mediated to you. So it is by nature, like mass media is presenting the information to as broad a context as possible. And so it's very hard to filter that into your own context and like be like, what does this actually mean? Like, what does this mean in my world? And so it used to be that like media, this is a fascinating topic, like especially in England, it like came up during the rise of the coffee houses because caffeine was coming into Europe. Every coffee house became a kind of hub for different groups of people. So like the merchants would go to one coffee house, and then the like lawyers would go to another, and then all the newspapers would be targeted to those coffee houses. So then you'd go to the lawyers to be like, well, what's going on in Parliament? And then the merchants would be like, which ship's coming in?
Wow.
And that's where you have these different newspapers, right?
Fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating.
So interesting.
So in some ways you're doing something that's completely normal, is that you surround yourself with the people that can mediate this like deluge of information in a way that's contextualized to your situation. And that totally is leverage, because your brain cannot possibly
Never.
contextualize the like intricacies of macroeconomics and like everything that's happening. But we're influenced by it, because by
Right.
nature, if you're building a large beauty business, you are multinational, whether you're tiny or not. You're in relationship to a conversation that's global, right?
Absolutely.
So you have to have the people that can help mediate what's happening. Like even very subtle, small example, beauty brands in the US, someone has to be like, hey, TikTok's going to be banned. This kind of affects us.
Right. Right.
About it. But it doesn't mean you have to read the news all the time, because it can make you really depressed.
Oh, well, yeah, that's why, partially why I don't read it or watch it. Irony being that I'm a journalist by trade, but it's meant to suck you in nowadays, especially unethical journalism is meant to like suck you in with their like clickbaity headlines and keep you in there, keep you consuming. But anyways, coming back to Stoic, and coming back to building this business on the back of this North Star. Tell me, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you first launched your brand, and how did you overcome them? And maybe leverage actually played a part in that. But tell me a little bit more about what were some of those first challenges that you overcame.
I'm kind of laughing because like it hurts my body.
I know, me too.
No, it's fine. It's fine. One of the big challenges is that, okay, so we're going forward with a thing that people don't know is a thing, right? Water safe cosmetics. And we thought, this is amazing. Like, this is a white space. Like, people are going to care. How great.
Yes.
So we hired a PR agency. Oh boy, did they not get it. Like, they just, eventually we found a working relationship, but they really were like, oh, great, a clean beauty brand. And I went, no. Like, if you do that, we're just another drop in an ocean of everybody is clean, right? And so it's interesting, because I've learned that over and over and over again, is that there's like a core DNA of who you are, like in the business and the brand and everything. And you'll never get that expression perfectly the first time, because it's going to be iterative no matter what, because like entities, humans, they and feeling a brand arrives through iteration. That's my belief. I mean, maybe some people can do it just once, but I doubt it. And at every step, someone else is going to come in and say what they see. Because we're so early and talking about water safety, they're like, oh, it's clean beauty. Perfect, I get it, it's clean beauty. And you're like, no. And so we ended up having to take the whole like launch off of their plate and just did it ourselves, which was so much work. And yes, they supported and put their name on the whole thing. Okay.
To credit.
But it taught me a lot, because it made me understand the difference between, like delegating and abdicating. Like, you can't abdicate all the control, even though someone says they're an expert at marketing or PR and all this, because they will, by nature, replicate what already exists. So you can only delegate like enough that they are in their mastery and you're leveraging their skills or their context and all of this. But the inner work again has to be so clear to be like, no, we're not that. Thank you for telling me that I'm that, but I'm not actually. So
this is so critical what you just said. I just want people to know this. Like, you have to be doing the inner work in order to not be swayed. This is what I'm hearing. In order to not be swayed by the people that you hire or bring into the team, who will bring in their own perspectives, their own experiences. Some will be great and they'll have a good point, certainly, but they may not be sifting it through a lens that you're sifting it through, right? So if you know what those boundaries are and you know what you're creating, you have to sift all the advice and the perspectives and the experiences people are bringing through your own lens, and then make a choice and a decision. Otherwise, like you said, the PR agency would have just called you clean beauty. You would have gone forward with a virtual, event that had all these, like, I remember, like, natural organic keywords, and it would have had no impact. But it actually ultimately did, because you did it your own way. So tell us more about that event. Like, what did you shift and change to make it very much like, water conservancy and unique to Stoic?
Yeah. So I've known from the beginning that because, a mission like this exists in a context. So we exist in a context, which is that we are on land, some of which is unceded to Indigenous water protectors in Canada. And Canada has 20% of the world's fresh surface drinking water. So our country actually has an ability to say a lot, like as a collective, about how the world should and can interact with bodies of water. And actually, it's interesting. Just a little side note: today, and we're in July, there was a new body of water in Spain that has just been declared personhood. They have personhood.
Whoa.
Excellent. Yeah. Oh, this is not the first time. It happened in Mexico first, and now I think it's in Portugal or Spain. But this should happen worldwide, because actually, like, the ecosystem of a water system should have the same personhood rights as a corporation. Like, humanity can consider animate, but like whole systems as having rights. So why wouldn't we do that to water? But anyway, I digress a little bit. So, but why was our event more Stoic is that I went, look, like, I am part of a larger conversation, and there are conversations in this country about Indigenous water protectors. I'll give just a small example, pointing out that there is an exploitation of fresh water. Like, it just is exploited by major corporations who bottle it without rights to it. And this has happened in 6 nations in Ontario. And there's amazing activists that, bring light to this and stop it, because it's from groundwater that belongs to the public. It's not owned by this corporation that pulls it up and bottles it. So basically, all I'm saying is that I know that we're part of a larger conversation. So I had a wonderful Indigenous singer come and open our lunch and learn about the brand. And I asked everyone to just close their eyes and like ground and touch a stone and kind of like connect to the feeling of like, why would we care so much about this? And I think fundamentally, when people really pause and think about their own connection to water, I think a lot of people love water. Like, they love oceans and lakes and have memories of.
I have very emotional connections to water.
Yeah. And so obviously that was a part of the event. Then there was also the story of how we formulate, and my mother was there, and we let people look in the microscope and like see the beauty of the emulsion we created, because also it's unique that Stoic makes the product, because not everyone makes their product. Like, there's a lot of manufacturers that manufacture for many brands. So it's kind of unique to have both a brand but also a formulation team in one company. So we were like, okay, well, let's highlight that. Let's let people see it. And so I used my theater training. It was very in 3 parts, and we'd like open doors and be like, this is part 2. And here's
I love this
experience. Yeah. And then we did like a Q&A session. And it's interesting because I think it was an incredibly successful event in terms of like our internal capacity, because we kind of went, that's a great script. But we still didn't get translated as what we are. Like, we still got translated as, a beauty brand from Toronto that's clean. And that's fine. I think the important thing is the repetition, because maybe 2 bloggers that actually picked up on the like deeper story, because they did it great. And it just means that we do have the credibility, and the people that are listening do read that. And when we went in, we have a beautiful designer that's helping us weave more indigeneity into the outer packaging. Funny, she thought we were Indigenous when she first found us, because she's like, you did all this stuff with water doctors. And I was like, yes, we're just allies. And she's like, oh, that's great. But it just means that like our people kind of can see a little bit of what we're up to.
Right.
And yeah, I think it's a funny combination. Like, I think people will only get it once we've done it enough times that it's just kind of like, oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it does take repetition, and it's a learning curve like with anything else. And you can either lean into a trend that's currently happening, you can have something that's more classic with a slight spin on it, or you can really be changing the conversation entirely, which is possible, but it just requires a lot more education, a lot more content, a lot more conversation and experiences and events like this.
Mhm.
And it'll take many times, multiple times, to like get people to actually start using different language to describe the brand and what it stands for. So I love that you highlighted that event and kind of how you brought it to life to align with that bigger mission. What is, like, if you're willing to share, you've talked a lot about like the inner work and mindsets. What is your practice? Like, do you have a practice? What does that look like?
Yeah, good question. I have my own practice, which I call my Somatic adventuring.
Oh my gosh, I love this. We need to know more.
Yeah, you do. It's funny because I'm like, the next project is my Somatic adventure school.
I love it. I'm signed up.
Yeah, great. Excellent. So I developed just like a really quite extensive somatic awareness experiencing from my theater training, which just means that like I just like really know what's going on in my body, like more than most people, which is a blessing and a curse, because then I'm like, oh, I have a little pain in my little finger. Oh, like
It means that like my spleen is
yeah,
moving
exactly.
crazy.
And so what I'll do is, I don't know, it's really hard to explain exactly what it is because it's a blend of things. But for those that know and are somatic people, they might know what I'm talking about. But it's like a blend of Alexander technique, Feldenkrais, some Kundalini yoga, although I find that area problematic. I have a few yoga trainings, but I don't teach them for some other problematic reasons. And then I just like, and look for kind of mindfulness technique in the experiencing of the body. So what does this emotionotic journeying look like? It just looks like active release of like tension, breathing, realignment of the core. A lot of it has to do with also like voice and breath kind of mirroring each other, because this is really interesting thing, because when you pick up the phone and someone can just go, hey, it's me, and you know exactly who it is.
Yes.
Like, we know people's voices. Like, we just can, like, we don't even have to think about it. And in the same way, also, if someone picks up the phone and goes, hey, you're like, oh my God, what's wrong? Like, we just know, right?
Yes.
And so a lot of like somatic journeying for me is like, okay, can I just get my voice to be much more connected?
Yes.
Much more like inside of my body.
Yes.
As I'm doing that, it looks kind of weird because, and I don't do this in public, but like I'll just start like singing or talking to myself and being like, what kind of wants to come out? And then I realize actually how I'm feeling, because you can't let this out at work, right? Like, I can't like rage at people,
or
but maybe
sing.
I'm raging. So I do that later. And so that's kind of my practice and inner work, is like giving myself the time and permission to really make the somatic and psychological links between my emotions.
Yeah.
I'm very regulated when I'm leading people, and very open and available, and like can listen to what's going on with them. But that's such a wild thing about leadership, is that yes, you can lead with vulnerability. Brene Brown, I love that whole concept, but you can't frighten people.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to come and say to your team, oh my God, I'm terrified, we won't make payroll. Like, no.
Right.
Like, you can lead with vulnerability and say, like, I'm not sure where we're going. I'm not sure how we're going to get there. I believe in you, the team, da, 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 da. But you can't give everything all the time of what's going on inside. but you definitely need to make space for what's going on inside to like
Mm-hmm.
let it move through.
Absolutely.
So I know for a lot of people, it's meditation and like yogic techniques and stuff. But I think you might have seen even through this little podcast that I'm a big history nerd. And I really, really dislike how in the West there's a habit in the wellness community, I put it in brackets, of not crediting where their work came from. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
go back to the concept of the blacksmith, it takes one generation to forget how to do something. I see that in the wellness community so strongly because
Mm-hmm.
we are translating what
Mm-hmm.
could be generationally passed on technique
Absolutely.
without context. And then
Mm-hmm.
without context, you can do all sorts of silly things
A
to your,
hundred
like,
percent.
anyway. So,
I 100% agree with that. Yeah, there's no, it's just, and the more you filter it through a new person and a new person and a new person, the less it loses, again, coming back to substance and actually
yeah.
the meaning of why you're doing this in the first place. Okay, so you touched on leadership, and I want to zoom in on this a little bit more because I would say watching you over the last 2 years of working together, I think it's been incredible what you've built. And I think one of your biggest strengths or zones of genius, I would say, is leading, managing, building strong teams, knowing who's doing what and why they're doing that and why they're where their skill sets lie and where their zone of genius lies, and being able to amplify that and also, motivate. Can you talk to me a little bit more about, did you know that you were good at this?
Thanks for sharing that. Um, I want to say yes, but also no. So, what I realized actually this past year, this has been part of my healing journey, is I realized, and I've been reflecting on, 10x is easier than 2x. They ask you to do like a backwards to be like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, when in your past did you 10x your life? And a lot of it had to do with leadership, is that I would just naturally kind of go into the leadership role of projects. And but what's interesting is that I would often do it as the second in command, and
Hmm.
realized recently that I really let myself be undervalued, like really undervalued and not credited properly, like for many projects. Um,
The
okay, so
supporting
that's an
role.
yeah, but like it's like leading from the second in command. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I was leading, and that's the actual truth. Is
Mm-hmm.
that like
Mm-hmm.
by title, I was like one below the director. So I'd be like on a project, especially like a theater project, I'd be like the assistant director. But no, I was just directing, and the director was off doing something else. So they were really the artistic director, but they weren't directing that project.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it was just anyway, it doesn't matter. That's a whole other, women should learn to take credit for their work. And we're often
Mm-hmm.
told to wait until someone else gives you credit. But yeah, no, in that process, I learned a lot about leading, because I think there was a gift in like the fact that I wasn't given the title of leader, like, but it was just evident. And then I
Mm-hmm.
just did it because I could and I knew how to. And there's so many skills that are involved in that. Um,
So,
yeah.
what is your process, and what was your process with Stoic in, what did that first hire look like? How did you know what to delegate and what role they would play, and then how did that role evolve?
Hmm. I'm going to answer the question in a roundabout way, because first hire is a kind of interesting one. What I'll say about hiring and about leading is that I think it's super important to, and I love this book, Personal MBA, I think is what it's called.
Yes.
They talk about Munger's mental models and how, like, each discipline in any sort of mastery has a mental model onto which you like hang all the concepts. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was my main goal, is I just went, I need to know all of the like lattice work of the mental concept of each part of a skincare business. So I was like, okay, so what's the digital marketing? And I even went into like data and data analytics, which I'm really not good at. But I just needed to know, like, what's the mental model we're looking at here?
Mm-hmm.
And so my first hire was very good for that stage of the business because all I wanted was someone that would do that with me. So they didn't need to be an expert in anything, but they needed to accept that what we were up to is finding the mental models of each part of the business and figuring out what color and variety of that role our business needed, right? Because like that's the thing, is that the second you start saying you run a skincare business, the number of ads you get of people trying to solve problems for you,
Oh, I know. Yes.
it's bonkers. But like until you actually really know what your problem is and can articulate it really, really well, your hire that like the contractor you hire will be way too expensive, will be the wrong person, will be solving a problem that's not actually your problem, not listen to you properly. So yeah, my first hire was really a young person that was willing to learn, and it was just looking for somebody that wanted to build the institutional knowledge with me, and that was important. They didn't need to perform a particular role, which I think in a startup is just so important.
They could do a lot of roles.
Yeah, just the willingness to understand that that's kind of necessary, and that I didn't have the answer for most things, and that we had to just try and see and test and
I love this.
quickly.
I love this message because I think the takeaway here that I'm hearing is you may, number one, that first hire may not be the perfect hire, but they're going to at least help highlight or illuminate what it is that you need or don't need, what the departments are in the business, and help in the next sort of iteration of the team and the business. Like they're going to highlight where your deficits are. They're going to highlight where you need support and what you need done. And I love that because I think so many people are so afraid of delegating and taking that first step in hiring support. And I'm sure many that are listening either maybe have already hired support or and they're looking at building a better team. Maybe they're not hiring the right people. I hear that a lot, is like keep hiring the wrong people and they're not working out, or they're afraid to hire. How did you know you were ready to bring a who on? Referencing our favorite book. How did you know you were ready for the who? And then tell us more about how you ultimately built that bigger team that you have now.
Well, transparently, like the who's coming in were strategic taking on of debt. Like it wasn't like we had surplus capital, let's hire someone. It's like, no, we understood ourselves as a venture very early on, and ventures have that lovely J curve where you go into a trough and then you're expecting to come out of it. And we're very confident we will, and our projections show that. So I never had this kind of like, oh God, I can't hire because we don't have the money. Because I'm like, we don't have the money for anything. So let's make a plan so that we know how deep in the trough we're going to go, right? So yeah, the hires typically would be when it became extremely clear, something that when I understood a portion of the business and I knew what it needed and that I couldn't do it very, 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 very well, then I would be like, we have to hire somebody. Like it's just,
I love that. I feel like, yes, that's so great. Do you think that, go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
I mean, I'm thinking about Hiral, who's an excellent hire. And I don't recommend this to other people, but it was a funny story because I just think it's sweet. Lovely young woman, absolutely brilliant visual storyteller, like just excellent. Like I've never met someone that has this level of capacity for translating complex stories visually. Like It's
That is
incredible.
a skill.
It's such a skill. And so she had posted on Facebook, just on like a group, an entrepreneurial group, like, I'm an art director, like I'm looking for a job. And it was like early 20s. And I was like, come meet me for coffee. And then she just like shows up and is just this young little thing, like a little bewildered, new to the country, like taking a film of the cafe we're in. It's a beautiful cafe. And I'm like, hello? Like, you're filming? Hello?
Are we filming a show?
Yeah. And then we just like very much connected in like ethos, because both of us have an arts background, and she just is very into filmmaking and storytelling generally. And then she showed me her portfolio of the work she had done in India, which was specifically for prop buying, prop styling, and art direction of pretty like high quality and big brands like car brands and stuff. And I just looked at her and I went, so what are you doing right now? She said she was working at this restaurant. She's supposed to start that day. And I went, how much am I paying you? And she said the number, and I just wrote it
Love
down.
it.
I was like, okay, no, you work for me now. And I sent it across the table.
That is amazing. Oh, I love
Yeah.
that.
It was quite funny because like we adapted because we had to, because I was like, we have to keep this talent. I don't recommend that. It's not like really nice to your team to be like, hey, there's this new person I hired today. But I will say I did take accountability for those kinds of things, because whenever I make a decision like that, like, yes, it's myself, my mom, who's a co-founder. Now we have a third co-founder. So, we have to make decisions together. But if I do something like that, I'm like, well, I'll put it on my line of credit. Like, I am owning this decision. Like, but anyway, it's an example though of like right timing and already knowing what we needed made it possible to make a fast decision. It's not that I was just like, oh, I like this person, like come hang out with me. It's that I knew we sucked at that part.
Yeah. So when you see it, you're like, yes,
Yeah.
let's go.
Yeah. And
I feel
like
that.
I knew I could work with this person because I can recognize the good work, but I can't do it.
So that is a skill in itself, to recognize good work that I can't necessarily do myself.
Yeah.
That is a skill, to be
Yeah.
able to recognize that in other people, to be able to notice outside of yourself enough to notice someone else's, where they shine.
Yeah,
I think that's
absolutely.
a skill. And then you mentioned too, hiring a role. The note that I took, because that's how I remember, is hiring a role before being ready for that role. And I will say that's always how we've hired. I don't like the idea, and maybe this is me personally, but maybe you can relate to this. I don't like going fast and things just breaking apart and then hiring. And I also think, I truly believe that in order to grow, you do need to make that investment in that person or the thing, whatever, first.
Yeah.
And it's proven to me time and time again. It's like you invest in this thing or this person, and then your business grows. Not like you'll wait forever sometimes. You could wait forever for
Yeah.
things to take off enough to afford XYZ thing. It's the investment in the XYZ thing that, in my experience, then takes me to the thing. And I think
I
that's what I'm
completely
hearing
agree.
from you.
I really agree with it. And I think for those people listening that might be of a different style or analytical style, one thing that can comfort the mind in those experiences is if you already think, okay, so I don't know. Okay, sorry. I'm going to go a different route to say like how to deal with the uncertainty of that. I've been doing this thing recently where I make a affirmation for the business to say we are building a world-class business. And then I say to myself, does a world-class business CEO do their own bookkeeping? No. If the answer is no, then I
I
go,
love
well, then
this.
I better take one step today to be closer to not doing that.
That is such an incredible lesson right there.
Yeah.
Like, I hope everyone who's listening, like, write that down and borrow it because I think that's so smart to always be taking it through that affirmative lens of
Mhm.
would a business of that is world class, someone who's leading it be doing this thing?
Yeah.
That's so great.
Because I understand the control feeling and the feeling of like, I really do understand how hard it is to make those choices. Yeah, but you got to make them
Mhm.
because, yeah, you can wait forever. And also, it's like a false security. Actually, that's the interesting thing, too, is there's a false security at a certain point because once you have some staff, you're paying payroll every 2 weeks. So if you take a month to make a decision of something that could bring you a lot more revenue, like that costs you. There's
Oh,
opportunity costs there,
1,000%.
right?
Huge
And
opportunity cost.
so, yeah. So,
You have to get into the habit, and I love this. You have to get into the habit of like making decisions faster and faster and faster.
yeah.
And I think I know that each milestone you reach with anything, any entrepreneurial endeavor requires I would say faster and faster decision making and the ability to like not hum and haw over something for a month or a week. You don't
Yeah.
even have the day.
Yeah.
It's like this. It's got to be super fast because you have a lot more decisions to go through. And like you said, there's an opportunity cost if you don't make that decision quickly enough.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that in order to take that risk and to, take that leap of faith, right? And say, I know that we'll come out on the positive side on the other end. Would you say that you have to really know yourself well to get there? Or do you feel like it's possible for people to be able to take those leaps and risks and not necessarily be aligned the way that you are with yourself?
I think the latter, actually, because the thing is that, okay, I'm going to get esoteric for a second. You had said you have to know yourself in order to take those leaps. But the problem is the self that you know is the person who didn't take the leap. So
That's
how
true.
could
That's so
you? You
true.
know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
so
That's so true.
no, you just have to think to yourself, who is the person that would be
Mm,
brave enough to do this, and then be that person. And like, also, I mean, the other thing is like comfort with the downside. Like, if, like, what is the actual downside of that
correct.
decision? And if the downside is, truly going to make it so that you can't pay your mortgage, then, well, maybe don't do that. Right. Like,
Right.
but if it's just like, anxiety, fear, like look at the anxiety and the fear and just like whoo, whoo, whoo.
Yeah.
Talk
And
to
look
your
at the proof
mentors.
of like what you've
Yeah.
been able to achieve as well. My husband, because he's a scientist, he's super analytical. So he likes to have plan B, plan C, plan D. It drives me bananas. And it's exactly that. It's like knowing he has to know what the downside is. He needs to go through all of the levels of downside for him to feel comfortable doing something. But that
Mhm.
works for people like him. And okay, so let's take a turn and tell me about the upside. So tell me a little bit about Stoic and some of what would you say are like your biggest accomplishments that you're most proud of and or like watershed moments in the business?
Yeah. I mean, I was just very proud. So my mother is the formulator and an exceptional perfectionist, which I love.
Mhm.
And she made our night cream, and we won a pretty major award in LA for it. And the award is called the Ale Award, and we were in the indie category, and we won most significant skincare formulation. And
Wow.
that's based on criteria for sustainability and like efficacy. So it's like, okay, cool. This
You're
is like,
seeing it for what
yeah,
it is.
yeah. And I think, you know, we're living in a little bit of an era where, there's a lot of awards out there. But the fact that this was judged by other scientists, we're just like, okay, this means something. And then basically taking that I think what it did to the team was made everyone go, oh, this is worth like shouting on the hilltops, you know? And because we started doing that, just the sales became easier for that product. And I think it just built just a higher level of confidence in the whole enterprise to be like, well, this product that we worked so hard on has been recognized. Excellent. So that was a bit of a moment there. And then I think I've had a lot of good public speaking moments actually, which has been really nice. I think I've come into a new relationship to how I want to do public speaking generally, through the brand, which has been great. We did a event for Ocean Week Canada, which is
That's
part of the
right.
UN's Ocean Decade, and I did just a pretty multifaceted workshop with some meditation and singing and thinking about bodies and how the body works and bodies of water work. I don't know. I just thought that that was really cool that, like, you know, on the one hand, we have this like super micro look at the world through the microscope, and my mother's like really attention to detail on the microscopic. And then there's just me going like, okay, now let's think about like the whole ocean and like, what does it mean? And so it just, I find it amazing that our brands, multiple brains can think so small and then so
It's so
big.
big at the same time.
Yeah.
And you have some exciting things coming up too with that we can't share yet, but you have some very exciting expansion opportunities that are coming
I
our
can share
way.
some of them.
Okay.
Well, I mean, this distribution in China is very exciting. I think I'm very, I love that we've basically gotten some nice buzz around our sustainability in just a market that we thought would do very well in. And so far we're proven right, which has been kind of cool. We did like a preliminary sales live selling for the Chinese market and did more sales than we did in an hour in a month. So it was, yeah, it's
Amazing.
very cool. That's
Amazing.
great. And then also, I think what's been really cool is my mother has now awoken more into realizing how much of cosmetic science is really just coming down the pike from pharmaceutical science. And so she's kind of going back to her original zone of mastery and is going back to create something that has applications both for the pharmaceutical industry, but also incredible applications for the cosmetic industry.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're seeing this in I attended the Beauty Matter Future 50 event, and they were talking about exactly this, like how so much of innovation in beauty right now is coming from bioinformatics and pharma.
Yep. Yep. And so we're seeing a lot more kind of integration between, you know, my mother's network and the cosmetic industry, because I think she had a little bit of imposter syndrome herself. Like she's like, and then she just buckled down forever, and now she's a very good one. So I don't know. Now I think she's just owning her uniqueness, because it's rare, I think, to have an organic chemist be a cosmetic chemist. Not to say anything about cosmetic chemists, they have a particular training, but to get to that level of ability with the chemistry is rare. And so I think my mom felt vulnerable about it because she does go down a rabbit hole with the research a little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to be like, come back.
What's so exciting is that, you know, when you work with her and your team, you know you're getting something innovative. Like that's what excites you and your team when it comes to like the formulation side of the business. And, you know, so that when there's like a problem or real problem to solve, like,
yeah. It's funny though, because we formulate for other people, and I think some of the clients are like, can we just finish? And she's a very determined woman. She just wants it to be perfect. But
yes. And that's what you want on your side. When
I know.
When it's something that you're going to be putting on your face, your body, and maybe internally, you know, who knows? Yeah. Okay. So tell me, Maria, what are your future plans for the brand? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So we are endeavoring to have a foothold in Asia Pacific, because I don't exactly know why. It's just the way things go sometimes. And likely we'll draw the dots backwards and understand why it makes so much sense. But,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think we found out very quickly that because we're doing water safety in an arena where clean beauty is taking so much of the mental bandwidth, what we've discovered is that in places where clean beauty hasn't even started really, like
Mm-hmm.
where there's still masstige market of India, China, they really like this water safe and they're willing to go in on that messaging. So we're like, let's go over there. Like, if this is where this messaging is going to land, why not? So we have to solve a lot of logistics problems, but particularly with freight, but we'll figure it out.
I'm super excited for you. And are there any new products in development? Anything new coming
Yeah.
out
So
that we
probably
can?
when this podcast comes out. So we've been working on a novel vitamin C. So vitamin C is notoriously unstable, but there's a way you can encapsulate it in different ways. So this is what we're
Mm-hmm.
on. We'll likely have a version of that out in November, but it's a new cream and it's very exciting because there's new research in what are called zombie cells or senescent cells. And these are cells in the skin that are like ready to pass on to the other world, but are kind of clinging on. And you just want to help them go away. I'm saying it as if they have like so much sentience, but yeah, it's basically just helping finish the cell
Nickel.
cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we get older, that slows down. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it also draws these like half dead cells are drawing
Mm-hmm.
resources from, the more healthy cells.
Fascinating. Oh my gosh, this is so
It's
cool.
fascinating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've made this cream that helps with that process, and it has an amazing ingredient. And part of it, the ingredient profile is pumpkins, actually. So we're hoping to get it out for Halloween. So it's all about zombies and Halloween.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is so fun. I love it.
Yeah,
Well, we need to time this episode correctly.
I know.
Halloween.
Yeah.
This I can have a conversation about this. I have so many more follow-up questions, but I know like we what, for the sake of time.
Mhm.
Tell me zombie cells, amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me more about what would you say for those founders who are listening who might be just trying to figure their way, find their way. Maybe they are entering a new territory like you are and struggling to figure out how to do it. What kind of advice would you give to other founders, or are there any sort of lessons that you would want to share with other founders?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is just don't do it alone. There's just no point. Like, truly. And I don't mean that by like hiring a team, but just I have been so lucky that one, I've been encouraged to reach out to other people, and then I just reach out often. You'll get more no's than you get yeses sometimes, but founders will meet with you. People will meet with you. And yeah, I think it's a hard thing because at the beginning, when your idea isn't like right at the beginning, like you're a little protective of it. You don't want to tell people what you're up to exactly. But practice telling people in small groups, and then suddenly you'll be like, oh, I can do this in front of 100 people and feel like it's awesome and I'm confident. So,
I love
yeah.
that because I think it also opens up so many new opportunities as a result of having conversations with people about
Yeah.
what you're working on.
Yeah. And it goes back to this theme too of, if you don't do it alone and you're constantly saying what you're doing, people will reflect back to you what they receive. And then you'll realize when you're like, oh, no, I'm not quite right.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you didn't quite get it.
Yeah. We need to
Go
figure
back
out
and work.
how to communicate this differently or better.
Yeah.
Which is actually like that. What you just explained is positioning. Positioning is really how would you explain something or someone or a brand in the eye of the viewer, not the person creating it.
Mm-hmm.
So great point. All right. So Maria, if people want to get connected with you or learn more about Stoic,
Yeah.
where's the best place to go?
You can follow us on Instagram at Stoic Beauty Skincare. If you DM, I read all the DMs still because I love to. You can also email us at info@stoic-beauty.ca. That's a more catch-all, so you might not get me, but you can email us. Why not?
Yeah.
You can also, no, you shouldn't call our phone line. That's a customer line. So many people try and solicit services on our customer line. We have to say, no, this is a customer line. Goodbye.
That's true. All right. Well, this is such a fun session. I feel like
Thank you.
we could talk for hours, and
That
there's
was
so
so
much
fun.
more that I want to uncover, and we'll have to do this again. But thank you everyone for listening in, and thank you, Maria, for joining us today.
Exactly. This is so sweet and fun.
Yay. I'll talk to you
Yay.
soon.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.